My parents thought they could use my past to blackmail me forever, so I flipped the script and used it to destroy them. When I was a junior in high school, my physics teacher impregnated me. He had me convinced we were in love, that we would travel the world, but the day I came to him with the 2 pink lines, he left the school and never came back. And my parents, well, they took a $100,000 settlement off the school in exchange for signing a contract, stating I was prohibited from going public with this information. Fast forward 9 years. I was working as a nurse during the day and cleaning offices at night to keep my head above water. Every month, I handed over nearly half my paycheck to my parents, who claimed they couldn't survive on their pensions, rent, utilities, groceries, medical copays, the works. Meanwhile, I was skipping meals so my 8-year-old daughter Emma could eat. Speaking of Emma, she got sick, really sick. The doctor said she had an aggressive form of leukemia that required immediate treatment. The medication alone was going to cost thousands every month, and that was with insurance. I went to my parents and explained the situation. I asked if they could just temporarily reduce what I was giving them so I could afford Emma's treatment. That's when they dropped the bomb. They sat me down in their living room with these cold, calculating expressions and told me that if I reduced their support by even $1, they would tell Emma and the entire extended family about her father. They would expose everything about what happened to me in high school. They said they had protected my reputation as a W word for years, and I owed them for that silence. I completely broke down. The thought of Emma finding out that her father was my teacher who abandoned us was unbearable. In my family, if people found out I had been manipulated and used as a teenager, I would be shamed and maybe even excommunicated. So I took out payday loans. I maxed out credit cards. I borrowed against my car. Anything to keep paying my parents while trying to afford Emma's treatment. But it wasn't enough. Emma's condition started getting worse because I had to delay some of her medications. She was missing school constantly and losing weight. I was working 80 hours a week and barely sleeping. My parents kept demanding more money, claiming their costs were increasing. They even wanted me to take a second mortgage on my house. One night, Emma collapsed at school and had to be hospitalized. While I was sitting in the hospital waiting room, a social worker started asking questions about why Emma's treatment had been inconsistent. I was so exhausted and stressed that I almost broke down right there. That's when I found the receipts. I had borrowed my parents' car to drive to the hospital because mine broke down. And when I was cleaning out some trash, I found restaurant receipts from expensive places, casino parking stubs, movie tickets, all from the past month when they claimed they could barely afford food. I started investigating. I followed them one afternoon and watched them walk into a casino. I documented everything, the gambling, the shopping trips. They were living it up on my money while my daughter was dying. But when I confronted them with the evidence, they didn't even try to deny it. Instead, they doubled down on the blackmail. They threatened to call child services and report me as an unfit mother. They said they would destroy my nursing license by claiming I was unstable. They demanded I sign over the deed to my house or they would ruin me completely. That's when something snapped inside me. I realized they had been systematically destroying my life for years. They had taken money that was meant to compensate for my trauma and used it to fund their lifestyle. Then they spent nearly a decade exploiting that same trauma to control me. So I started recording our conversations. I gathered all the evidence of their financial abuse. I couldn't afford a lawyer, so I became a professional internet sleuth and learned that what they were doing to me was actually illegal. Financial exploitation, extortion, the whole thing. Then I called a family meeting. I invited all my aunts, uncles, and cousins, everyone who had spent years praising my parents for being such generous grandparents while judging me for accepting their help. And at this family meeting, I played the recordings. I showed the receipts. I explained how they had been stealing money meant for Emma's cancer treatment to fund their gambling addiction. And then I told them the truth about the school settlement, how my parents had been paid $100,000 to keep quiet about a teacher who assaulted their daughter, money they had hidden and spent while forcing that same daughter to work herself into the ground to support them. The room went completely silent. My Aunt Beverly was the first to speak. She just kept shaking her head and saying no over and over. My Uncle Kenneth stood up and walked out without a word. My cousin Lisa started crying. The silence stretched on for what felt like hours but was probably only minutes. Then my mom started talking. She said I was lying. She said I was having a mental breakdown from the stress. She told everyone I had been acting erratic lately and making up stories. My dad backed her up immediately. He said they had been worried about me for months. He claimed I had been neglecting Emma and they were considering calling child services themselves. I pulled out my phone and played another recording. It was from just 2 days ago when they threatened to destroy my nursing license. My mom's voice was crystal clear, telling me I better keep paying or she would make sure I never worked in healthcare again. But even with the evidence right there, some of my relatives started looking at me differently. My Aunt Teresa said maybe I was just stressed and misunderstanding things. My Uncle Russell suggested we all take a break and talk about this later. I could see it happening. Years of my parents being the perfect grandparents were working against me. They had built up so much goodwill while I was always the struggling single mom who needed help. My cousin Jordan was the only one who seemed to believe me completely. She came over and put her hand on my shoulder. She whispered that she had always wondered where my parents got their money, but most of the family was already starting to side with my parents. They were too shocked to process what I was telling them, or maybe they just didn't want to believe it. My mom started crying then, big dramatic tears. She said she couldn't believe her own daughter would attack her like this. She said all they had ever done was try to help me. My dad put his arm around her and glared at me. He said I was ungrateful and disturbed. The meeting ended with nothing resolved. Half the family left without saying goodbye to me. The other half mumbled about needing time to think. Only Jordan stayed behind. She said she believed me and would help however she could, but I could tell even she was overwhelmed by everything. I went home that night feeling worse than before. I had hoped the truth would set me free, but instead it seemed like I had just made everything worse. Emma was still in the hospital. I still had no money for her treatment, and now my parents were going to retaliate. I didn't have to wait long. The next morning, I got a call from my supervisor at the hospital. She said they had received a concerning report about me. Someone had called claiming I was stealing medications and showing signs of mental instability. I knew immediately it was my parents. My supervisor said I would need to take a leave of absence while they investigated. Just like that, my main source of income was gone. I tried to explain, but she said it was protocol. Any accusations had to be investigated. She seemed sympathetic, but her hands were tied. I hung up and just sat there in shock. Without my nursing job, I couldn't even afford our rent, let alone Emma's treatment. I called the cleaning company to see if I could pick up more shifts, but they said they were fully staffed. I spent the rest of the day applying for jobs online, but I knew it was pointless. Any background check would show I was under investigation at my previous employer. My parents had played their cards perfectly. That afternoon, I went to visit Emma at the hospital. She looked so small in that bed. She asked when she could come home. I told her soon and tried not to cry. The doctor pulled me aside and said they needed to discuss her treatment plan. He said the delays were causing complications. He asked if there were financial issues they should know about. I wanted to tell him everything, but I just nodded and said I would figure it out. On my way out, I ran into my parents in the hospital lobby. They were there visiting Emma, playing the role of concerned grandparents. My mom smiled at me coldly. She asked if I had reconsidered their offer about the house. I didn't answer. I just walked past them and out to my car. But I could hear my dad telling a nurse how worried they were about me, how I seemed to be falling apart under the stress. They were already laying the groundwork to make me look unstable. That night, Jordan called. She said she had been thinking and wanted to help. She offered to lend me some money, but I knew she didn't have much. She was a single mom too, working as a teacher. I thanked her but said no, this wasn't her fight. But she insisted on helping somehow. She said she had started going through old family photos and documents. She thought maybe she could find something to support my story. I didn't have much hope, but I appreciated her trying. The next few days were a blur. I sold everything I could. My jewelry, my TV, some furniture. It wasn't nearly enough. Emma needed to start her next round of treatment immediately, but I couldn't afford it. I went to the hospital billing department and begged for more time. They set up a payment plan, but said treatment couldn't continue without at least a partial payment upfront. I had no choice. I went back to my parents. I found them at home, sitting in their living room like nothing had happened. I told them Emma would die without treatment. I said I would do whatever they wanted. Just please let me use some money for her medical bills. My mom looked at me with such satisfaction. She said they had been thinking about my situation. She said they would help with Emma's treatment, but only if I publicly apologized to the family for lying about them. And I had to sign over my house to them immediately. The house was all Emma and I had. It was our security. But what choice did I have? I agreed to their terms. My dad pulled out paperwork he had already prepared. As I signed, my mom called several relatives on speakerphone. She made me apologize for my breakdown at the family meeting. She made me say I had been confused and stressed, that I had made up terrible lies about my loving parents. Each word felt like poison in my mouth, but I said them all. For Emma. After I finished humiliating myself, they gave me a check. Just enough for one treatment. They said I would get more after I moved out of the house. They wanted me out within 30 days. I took the check and left. I paid the hospital that afternoon and Emma got her treatment that evening. But I knew this was just the beginning. My parents had won this round. They had turned most of the family against me, cost me my job, and now they were taking my home. But at least Emma would live. That's all that mattered. Jordan called that night excited. She said she had found something interesting in old family files. She wanted to meet in person to show me. We agreed to meet the next day at a coffee shop. I didn't dare hope, but maybe she had found something that could help. Maybe there was still a way to fight back. But I knew my parents wouldn't stop. They had too much to lose now. They had shown their true colors, and they would do anything to keep their secret. The war between us had only just begun. I met Jordan at the coffee shop the next morning. The place was nearly empty. Just a few early risers hunched over their laptops. She had a manila folder stuffed with papers clutched against her chest like a shield. Her eyes darted around the room, checking each face before settling on mine. She slid into the booth across from me, keeping her voice low as she pushed the folder across the scratched wooden table. Inside were bank statements from years ago. The paper yellowed at the edges, but the numbers still clear. My parents' bank statements from right after the settlement. Jordan explained in hushed tones how she'd found them in her mom's attic while helping clean out old boxes. Apparently, my Aunt Beverly had helped my parents with their taxes that year, back when everyone still trusted them. The statements showed the $100,000 deposit clearly, dated just 2 weeks after my 18th birthday. But more importantly, they showed where the money went. Within 6 months, almost all of it was gone. Gambling withdrawals at the casino 40 miles away, shopping sprees at high-end department stores, a luxury cruise to the Caribbean. They had blown through my settlement money before I even graduated high school. I stared at the papers, feeling sick to my stomach. The coffee I'd ordered sat untouched, growing cold as I traced the transactions with my finger. All these years, they made me feel guilty for needing help, calling me ungrateful when I struggled to pay bills. But they had spent money that was supposed to be for my future, for my trauma, for the therapy I never got, and the education I had to put on hold. Jordan said there was more. She pulled out another document, handling it carefully like evidence in a crime scene. It was a letter from the school's lawyer to my parents, the official letterhead still crisp despite the years. It outlined the settlement terms in clear legal language. The money was specifically designated for my care, education, and future needs. My parents had violated the agreement by spending it on themselves. I took pictures of everything with my phone, my hands shaking slightly as I tried to get clear shots in the dim coffee shop lighting. Finally, I had real proof, not just of their current extortion, but of their original betrayal. Jordan said she would keep the originals safe in a safety deposit box her mom didn't know about. She also mentioned that her mom Beverly was starting to have doubts about my parents' story. Apparently, Beverly had noticed some inconsistencies in what they were saying. Small things like dates that didn't match up and bills they claimed to have that didn't exist. They were adding up. I thanked Jordan and headed home to pack, my mind racing with this new information. I had less than 30 days to find a new place for Emma and me, and the rental market in our area was brutal. But first, I needed to figure out how to use this new information strategically. I couldn't just call another family meeting. My parents had already poisoned that well, turning most of the relatives against me with their lies. I needed a different approach, something they wouldn't see coming. That afternoon, I got a call from the hospital billing department. The woman on the phone sounded apologetic but firm. They said there had been an issue with the check my parents gave me. It had bounced. The payment was rejected and Emma's treatment was being put on hold again. I felt my heart drop into my stomach. I called my parents immediately, my fingers fumbling with the phone. My mom answered on the third ring and said it must be a bank error. She said they would fix it tomorrow, maybe the day after. But I could hear the smugness in her voice, the barely concealed satisfaction. This was intentional. They were punishing me for not signing the house over fast enough. I drove to their house and pounded on the door until my fists hurt. My dad answered, blocking the doorway with his body. He wouldn't let me in, said I was being hysterical and dramatic as always. He said if I didn't calm down, he would call the police and report me for harassment. I told him Emma needed that treatment, that every day without it mattered. He just shrugged like we were discussing the weather and closed the door in my face. I heard the deadbolt turn, locking me out of the house I'd helped pay for. I sat in my car shaking with rage, my whole body trembling. They were using my daughter's life as a bargaining chip, playing games with a sick child's health. I called Jordan and told her what happened, trying to keep my voice steady. She said she would talk to her mom immediately. Maybe Beverly could convince my parents to stop this insanity, but I knew it wouldn't work. My parents were too far gone, hammered on their own power. They cared more about control than their granddaughter's life. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about those bank statements, seeing the numbers in my mind, about how they had stolen my future and were now stealing Emma's. The cruise they took cost more than Emma's entire treatment plan. By morning, I had made a decision. If they wanted to play dirty, I would too. I started by calling every relative who had been at that family meeting. I kept my voice concerned, not angry. I didn't accuse my parents of anything directly. I just said I was worried about them. I mentioned how they seemed to be having money troubles despite all the help I gave them. I suggested maybe they had a gambling problem and needed an intervention. After all, I'd seen them at the casino so often. The rumor mill started churning immediately. My Aunt Teresa called my Aunt Beverly within an hour. Beverly mentioned finding some old financial documents that concerned her. Soon half the family was talking about my parents' possible gambling addiction. It wasn't exactly what I had revealed at the meeting, but it was close enough to make people think. My parents tried to do damage control, but the seed was planted. Once doubt creeps in, it's hard to stop. Then I took it a step further. I called the casino where I had photographed them. I said I was worried about my elderly parents' gambling problem. I asked if there was any way to check how much they had spent there. The casino couldn't give me specifics due to privacy laws, but they confirmed my parents were regular customers. Very regular. The woman on the phone even sounded concerned. I made sure to have this conversation while my cousin Mason was visiting to check on Emma. He overheard everything from the kitchen. Within 2 days, the family narrative had shifted dramatically. Now instead of me being crazy and ungrateful, people were worried about my parents gambling. My mom called me screaming so loud I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She said I was ruining their reputation with vicious lies. She threatened to tell Emma everything immediately, to poison my daughter against me. I recorded the call on my laptop. Then I played it for Jordan, who played it for her mom. Beverly finally started to see the truth. The mask was slipping. But my parents weren't done. They showed up at Emma's school the next day and tried to check her out early. They told the office they were taking her to a doctor's appointment I had forgotten about. Luckily, the school had protocols and called me first. I rushed over, breaking several traffic laws, and found them in the principal's office spinning some story about being concerned grandparents who just wanted to help. I had to show the principal legal documents proving I had sole custody. My parents left, but not before my mom whispered that this wasn't over. Her breath smelled like wine at 10 in the morning. That night, someone called child services and reported me for medical neglect. I knew it was them before the social worker even explained why she was there. The social worker showed up the next morning with a clipboard and a serious expression. I had to show her all of Emma's medical records, every appointment, every prescription, explain why some treatments had been delayed. I couldn't tell her about the extortion, but I mentioned financial difficulties and family problems. She seemed satisfied, but said she would need to follow up. Another problem to add to my growing list. Another way for them to hurt us. Jordan called with an update while the social worker was still there. Her mom, Beverly, had confronted my parents about the old bank statements. They had tried to lie at first, then changed their story multiple times, but Beverly had the proof right there in black and white. She told them she knew about the settlement money. My parents had broken down and admitted to spending it, but claimed they had needed it for bills and medical expenses. Beverly didn't buy it. She knew they'd been healthy back then. She was finally starting to see who they really were beneath a loving parent act. The next day, I got an unexpected call that made my stomach drop. It was from my old cleaning company. They said they had received multiple complaints about me from a client. The client claimed I had stolen from their offices, expensive equipment missing after my shifts. I knew immediately my parents were behind it. They were trying to destroy any chance I had of working. The company said they had to let me go pending investigation. Even though there was no proof, they couldn't risk keeping me on. Company policy. I was unemployed again. I was running out of options fast. No job, about to lose my house, and Emma's treatment on hold. I decided to take a risk. I posted in a local community Facebook group that night. I didn't name my parents, but I told my story. Single mom, sick kid, being extorted by family members who had already stolen from me once. I asked if anyone knew resources that could help. The post went viral in our small town within hours. Hundreds of comments poured in, some offering help, others sharing similar stories of family betrayal. My parents saw the post within hours. They were furious. My dad showed up at my house at 11 p.m. demanding I take it down. I refused to open the door. He said I was embarrassing the family, airing dirty laundry in public. I said they were unaliving their granddaughter. He actually laughed, the sound carrying through the door. He said Emma was fine, just a little sick, that I was being dramatic as always. That's when I realized they didn't even care if she died. They only cared about their image and control. They had never loved us. I recorded him saying all of this through the door. Then I updated my Facebook post with the audio. The community response was immediate and overwhelming. People were outraged. Some recognized my parents from the description. Others started putting pieces together from their own interactions. My parents' carefully crafted reputation started crumbling, but they still had one more card to play. The next morning, Emma woke up with a fever of 103. She was getting worse without treatment, her little body unable to fight anymore. I rushed her to the hospital, carrying her because she was too weak to walk. While I was filling out paperwork with shaking hands, my parents arrived. They had brought several family members with them as witnesses. They loudly told everyone in the waiting room that I was refusing their help, that they had offered to pay for everything, but I was too proud and spiteful. My uncle Kenneth backed them up. He said he had witnessed me turning down their generous offer. The other patients stared at me with judgment. I was too exhausted to fight. I just focused on Emma, holding her hand while she lay on the hospital bed. The doctor said she needed immediate treatment or things would get critical. Her numbers were dropping fast. I begged the billing department for help, willing to sign anything. That's when a stranger approached me. She said she had seen my Facebook post. She worked for a local charity that helped families with medical bills. She said they could cover Emma's treatment while we sorted everything out. I broke down crying right there in the hospital, unable to stop the tears. My parents tried to intervene. They told the charity worker I was lying, that I was mentally unstable, but she had already done her research. She knew about my job loss, the investigation, everything. She also mentioned that several people had come forward with stories about my parents. Apparently, they had a reputation for taking advantage of people, small loans never repaid, and sob stories that didn't add up. The charity approved Emma's treatment that day. The relief was overwhelming. Emma started getting better immediately. The right medications made such a difference. Her color improved within hours. But my parents weren't finished. They started calling relatives and telling them I had publicly humiliated them. They said I was accepting charity instead of family help out of spite. Some relatives relatives believed them. Others were starting to question their story. The family was dividing into camps, and the holiday season was approaching. Jordan's mom, Beverly, did something unexpected. She called a family meeting of her own. She said she had important information to share about the family's future. My parents tried to refuse, but Beverly insisted. She said if they didn't come, she would share the information anyway. They had no choice but to attend. I was invited too, but I was scared. Last time hadn't gone well. My hands shook just thinking about it. Jordan convinced me to go. She said her mom had been doing her own investigation for weeks. She had found more than just bank statements. So I went, bringing Emma with me. She was still weak but stable. I wanted the family to see what their indifference had caused. The meeting was at Beverly's house. Most of the family showed up, curious about what was going on. The tension in the room was thick. Beverly started by showing the bank statements on a projector she'd set up. She explained about the settlement money, going through each transaction methodically. Then she dropped a bomb. She had found emails, old emails between my parents from right after the settlement. They were planning how to spend the money, planning vacations and shopping trips, joking about hitting the jackpot, all while their teenage daughter was dealing with trauma. One email from my mom said I was young and would get over it. The room was silent. My parents tried to leave, but Beverly wasn't done. She had also found records of their gambling losses, years of losses, hundreds of thousands of dollars over the past decade, money that came from me, money that should have gone to Emma. She had contacted the casino and gotten printouts of their loyalty program status. They were VIP members with comped rooms and free meals. Then Beverly showed everyone my Facebook post and the community response. She read comments from people my parents had borrowed money from and never repaid, stories of their manipulation and lies going back years. She said she was ashamed she hadn't seen it sooner. She apologized to me in front of everyone. She said the family had failed me and Emma. Her voice broke as she spoke. My parents tried to defend themselves, but the evidence was overwhelming. My dad blamed my mom for the gambling. My mom blamed him for the lies. They turned on each other right there in front of everyone. Years of secrets spilled out. How they had been broke before the settlement. How they had seen it as their chance to live the life they wanted. How they justified it by saying I was young and would be fine. My mom admitted she never thought I'd amount to anything anyway. My cousin Lisa started crying. She said she had suspected something was wrong but didn't want to believe it. My uncle Russell walked over to my parents and told them they were disgusting. One by one, family members turned their backs on them. The truth was finally out and it was uglier than anyone had imagined. But my parents still tried one last manipulation. My mom looked at Emma and said she was sorry she was sick. Then she looked at me and said, if I had just been a better daughter, none of this would have happened. She said I had forced them to take extreme measures by being selfish. She actually tried to blame me for their crimes. That's when Emma spoke up. My quiet, sick little girl looked at her grandmother and said she was mean. She said I was the best mom in the world and worked hard every day. She said she didn't want to see them anymore. Her voice was small but clear. The room erupted. Family members started yelling at my parents, calling them monsters, saying they were dead to the family. My parents finally realized they had lost. They left Beverly's house to a chorus of condemnation, but I knew they wouldn't give up that easily. They had lost their income source and their reputation. They would want revenge. They always had to have the last word. I was right. The next day, they filed a complaint with the nursing board. They claimed I had mental health issues that made me unfit to practice. They submitted statements saying I had threatened them and shown signs of instability. It was their final attempt to destroy my career. But this time I was ready. I had recordings, witnesses, and a charity that was willing to vouch for me. I had learned to document everything. The investigation was tough, but Jordan and Beverly testified on my behalf. The charity worker provided documentation of my parents' attempted interference with Emma's treatment. Even some of my other relatives wrote letters supporting me. The nursing board found no evidence of wrongdoing. My license was cleared and I could return to work. My supervisor apologized and offered me my job back immediately with a small raise for the trouble. But the damage to my parents was permanent and swift. Word had spread through our small town like wildfire. Their friends stopped calling. Their church asked them to leave after learning about the theft. The casino banned them after learning about the situation with Emma. They became pariahs overnight, all their own doing. They tried to call me several times, but I didn't answer. They had nothing left to threaten me with. Emma continued her treatment without interruption. The charity covered everything while I got back on my feet. Family members who had stood by started helping too. Beverly gave me money she said my parents had borrowed from her years ago. Lisa offered to babysit so I could work extra shifts. Jordan helped me find a small apartment we could afford. It wasn't much, but it was ours, and no one could take it away. The house situation was complicated since I had signed it over under duress. But Beverly's husband Walter was a retired real estate agent. He found errors in the paperwork my parents had prepared. They hadn't filed it properly in their rush to take control. The transfer wasn't valid. I still owned my home. When my parents found out, they threatened to sue. But what lawyer would take their case? They had no money left and no credibility. The threat was empty. 3 months later, Emma was in remission. The doctor said she had responded well to consistent treatment. We celebrated with a small party at our house. The family members who had supported us came. Even some people from the Facebook group who had become friends. It was the first time in years I felt like we had a real support system. My parents weren't invited. I heard they had moved to a small apartment across town. They were working minimum wage jobs and barely scraping by. Exactly what they had put me through for years. Sometimes karma does come around. They tried to contact Emma on her birthday, sent a card with money in it. I gave Emma the choice. She threw it in the trash without opening it. She said people who hurt others don't deserve forgiveness. Smart kid. Probably got that from dealing with so much so young, but she was healing. We both were. The extended family basically excommunicated my parents after everything came out. They weren't welcome at holidays or family events. A few relatives felt bad for them, but most agreed they had brought it on themselves. The family rallied around Emma and me instead, offering help and support we should have had all along. It took almost losing everything to gain what we really needed, a family that actually cared about us. I sometimes wonder if my parents regret what they did, if they ever think about how different things could have been. But then I remember their cold faces that day they threatened me, the satisfaction in their eyes when they thought they had me trapped. No, they only regret getting caught. They regret losing their cash cow and their reputation. They don't regret hurting their daughter and granddaughter. People like that never do, but we survived them. Emma got healthy. I got my career back. We kept our home, and we learned who really cared about us. The price was high, but the freedom was worth it. No more threats, no more manipulation, no more giving away money we desperately needed. Just Emma and me, building our life without the weight of their greed dragging us down. We were finally free. 6 months passed, and things were finally stable. Emma was doing great with her treatments and even started playing soccer again. again. I was back at work full-time and had even picked up some overtime shifts. We were catching up on bills and I could actually buy groceries without checking my bank balance first. Then my parents tried one more thing. I got a letter from a lawyer saying my parents were contesting the house paperwork. They claimed I had verbally agreed to give them the house and they wanted me to honor that agreement. The letter was from some cheap lawyer who probably took their case for a small retainer. I wasn't even worried. I had Beverly's husband Walter on my side and he knew property law inside and out. He said their case was garbage and would get thrown out immediately. But my parents were desperate. They started showing up places. First at the grocery store where they cornered me by the produce section. My mom started crying about how they were struggling. My dad said I had ruined their lives over a misunderstanding. I just walked away. They followed me through the store until security made them leave. Then they showed up at Emma's school again. This time the principal called the police. They were given a warning about trespassing. Jordan called me one afternoon with news. She had been at the bank and overheard something interesting. My parents were trying to get a loan using my house as collateral. They were telling the bank they had ownership papers. The bank clerk shut them down when they couldn't produce proper documentation, but it showed they were getting desperate. They were running out of money and options. I decided to be proactive this time. I went to the police station and filed a report about the harassment. The officer said without threats of violence there wasn't much they could do, but he suggested I document everything and consider a restraining order if it escalated. I started carrying a small notebook everywhere. Every time I saw them, every attempt at contact, everything went in that notebook with dates and times. The family was still divided about my parents. My Aunt Teresa felt bad for them despite everything. She said they were old and had made mistakes. She tried to convince me to help them a little. I reminded her about Emma in the hospital, about the bounced check, about years of extortion. She stopped asking after that, but I knew she was probably giving them money on the side. That was her choice. My parents' lawyer sent another letter. This time they were claiming emotional distress. They said I had turned the family against them and ruined their reputation. They wanted damages. Walter laughed when he read it. He said it was the most ridiculous thing he'd ever seen. He wrote a response basically telling them to stop wasting everyone's time. He also mentioned we had documentation of their extortion and theft. The letters stopped after that, but my parents found other ways to bother us. They started a rumor that I was keeping Emma from them out of spite. They told anyone who would listen that they just wanted to see their granddaughter. Some people who didn't know the whole story believed them. I started getting messages on Facebook from strangers saying I should forgive my parents. That family was important. That holding grudges was unhealthy. I blocked them all. Emma asked about her grandparents one day. She wanted to know why they were so mean. I kept it simple. I told her sometimes people care more about money than family. Sometimes people make bad choices and hurt others. She nodded like she understood. Then she asked if they would ever be nice. I told her I didn't think so. She seemed okay with that answer. Kids are resilient. My parents tried going through other relatives next. They convinced my Uncle Kenneth to call me. He said they were sorry and wanted to make amends. He said they admitted they were wrong. I asked if they were willing to return the money they stole. He got quiet. Then he said that was in the past and we should move forward. I hung up. They weren't sorry. They were broke. Jordan's mom, Beverly, had become like a real mother to me. She invited us over for dinner every Sunday. She helped with Emma when I had to work late. She even came to Emma's school events. One day she told me she had written my parents out of her will. She said after what they did, they were dead to her. She was leaving everything to her kids and grandkids, including Emma and me in that group. I cried when she told me that. The harassment continued in small ways. Hang-up calls from unknown numbers, my parents sitting in their car outside my work, following me to the grocery store but staying just far enough away. They were trying to intimidate me without technically doing anything illegal. I kept documenting everything. My notebook was getting full. The police said it still wasn't enough for a restraining order. They needed proof of threats. Then they made a mistake. My mom left a voicemail one night after drinking too much. She said I would regret ruining their lives. She said karma would get me. She said she hoped Emma got sick again so I would know how it felt to suffer. She actually said she hoped my daughter would suffer. I saved that voicemail immediately, made multiple copies. That was the threat I needed. The restraining order was approved within a week. My parents were ordered to stay 500 feet away from Emma and me. No contact of any kind. No third-party contact either. If they violated it, they would be arrested. The judge seemed disgusted when he heard the voicemail. He said threatening a child was unconscionable. My parents didn't even show up to contest it. They knew they had messed up. With the restraining order in place, life got peaceful. No more harassment, no more showing up at random places, no more letters from lawyers. They were legally required to leave us alone. Emma noticed the difference immediately. She said it felt safer now. She was right. We could go places without looking over our shoulders. We could relax in our own home without worrying about surprise visits. I heard updates about my parents through the family grapevine. They were working at a fast food place, living in a studio apartment on the bad side of town. Their car had been repossessed. They were experiencing exactly what they had put me through for years. The difference was I had been young with a sick child. They were just facing the consequences of their own greed. I didn't feel sorry for them. Emma's health continued to improve. She was gaining weight and had energy again. Her doctors were amazed at her progress. She was even able to go back to school full-time. Her grades were good and she made new friends. She joined the art club and discovered she loved painting. Watching her be a normal kid again was everything. That's all I had wanted, just for her to be healthy and happy. The charity that had helped us invited me to speak at their fundraiser. I was nervous but agreed. I told our story to a room full of donors, about how their help had literally saved my daughter's life, about how family had failed us but strangers had stepped up. Several people cried during my speech. They raised more money that night than any previous year. The director said my story had inspired people to give. My nursing career was going better than ever. My supervisor recommended me for a promotion to charge nurse. It came with better hours and more money. I could finally stop working overtime just to survive. I could be home for dinner with Emma, help with homework, watch movies together, normal mom stuff that I had missed for so long. We were building the life we deserved. Beverly threw Emma a huge birthday party that year. The whole family came except my parents, obviously. Emma was the center of attention and loved every minute. She got presents and played games and ate too much cake. She told me it was the best birthday ever. Watching her laugh with her cousins, I realized this was the family we had needed all along, the people who actually loved us. I ran into my dad at the pharmacy a few months later. He looked terrible, thin and gray and tired. He started to approach me but saw my hand go to my phone. He remembered the restraining order. He just stood there looking pathetic. For a second, I almost felt bad. Then I remembered Emma in the hospital, the bounced check, the threats, the voicemail wishing she would get sick again. I walked past him without a word. My mom tried one last manipulation. She sent a letter to Emma's school saying she was concerned about her granddaughter's welfare. She claimed I was an unfit mother who had kept Emma from necessary medical care. The school had to investigate, but they had all of Emma's medical records. They could see she was healthy and thriving. The principal called me personally to apologize for the inconvenience. He said they had to follow up on all concerns, but he could see it was baseless. That letter violated the restraining order since it was third-party contact about us. I filed a police report immediately. My parents were arrested at their apartment. My mom cried and said she just missed her granddaughter. My dad blamed her for sending the letter. They turned on each other in front of the cops. Both got charged with violating the order. They spent a night in jail and got probation. One more violation and they would do real time. After that arrest, they finally stopped completely. Maybe reality had finally sunk in. Maybe they realized I wasn't the weak teenage girl they had controlled for so long. Maybe they were just too tired to keep fighting. Whatever the reason, we didn't hear from them again. The silence was beautiful. Emma and I could finally just live our lives without fear or drama. The extended family settled into a new normal. My parents weren't mentioned at gatherings. It was like they had never existed. A few relatives still had contact with them but kept it separate. Nobody pressured me to forgive them anymore. They had seen what my parents were capable of. They understood why reconciliation was impossible. Some things can't be fixed with an apology. Emma asked me once if I was sad about my parents. I told her the truth. I was sad about the parents I wished I had. The ones who would have protected me and loved Emma, but I wasn't sad about losing the parents I actually had. They had been hurting us for years. Sometimes you have to let go of toxic people even if they're family. She understood in her 8-year-old way. We kept the house and made it truly ours. Painted Emma's room purple because that was her favorite color. Put up pictures of our real family. The people who had stood by us. Beverly and Jordan and Lisa and everyone who had helped. That was our family now. The people who showed up when things got hard. Who believed us when the truth was ugly. Who helped without expecting anything back. I sometimes think about that teacher who started everything. Wonder if he ever thinks about the damage he caused. But mostly I don't. He's not worth the mental energy. My parents, though, they had a choice. They could have used that money to help me heal. To get me therapy and support. Instead, they used it for themselves, then spent years punishing me for their crime. That's harder to let go. But we survived it all. Emma was healthy. I had a good job. We had a home and a real family. The price had been high, but we had won in the end. My parents were living the life they had forced on me while we were thriving. There's some justice in that. They had played stupid games and won stupid prizes, as Reddit likes to say. Meanwhile, Emma and I had won our freedom. Looking back now, I'm grateful in a weird way. If my parents hadn't pushed so hard, I might have spent my whole life under their control, giving them money while Emma and I struggled, believing I owed them for their silence. Their greed had freed us in the end. They had shown me who they really were and given me the strength to fight back. Now Emma and I were free to build our life without them. That's really the end of the story. No dramatic final confrontation. No tearful reconciliation. Just life going on without them in it. Emma healthy and happy. Me working a job I loved. A family that actually cared about us. And two people who had learned they were never welcome in our lives again. Sometimes the best revenge really is living well. And we were living very well indeed. My parents made me and my sister take turns, being their only daughter, Sophie, every month while the other had to live in the basement and pretend she didn't exist. When I got sick during an off month and started vomiting blood, they gave us 7 days to decide which sister they'd kill with pills, so they could finally have just one daughter. But we tricked them into thinking we'd both been poisoned and escaped while they panicked. My parents said they could only have one daughter, and they meant it. My parents made me and my sister swap identities every month because they said only one daughter deserved to exist at a time, and we had to take turns being the real child while the other became invisible. My parents always said they'd only wanted one daughter. When my sister Scarlett was born 11 months after me, they treated it like a cosmic mistake that needed correcting. They couldn't afford to raise 2 children, they said. But more importantly, they didn't have enough love for 2 daughters. Lucky for them, we looked nearly identical. Same dark hair, same green eyes, same small frame. So they created a system. One month I was their daughter Sophie. The next month I had to pretend I didn't exist while Scarlett became Sophie. The outside world never knew there were 2 of us. The switching ceremony happened at midnight on the 1st of each month. Scarlett and I would stand in the living room while our parents formally transferred their recognition from one daughter to the other. The girl whose turn it was ending had to hand over everything. Her bedroom, her clothes, her name, even her school assignments. Mom would kiss the leaving daughter on the forehead and say, "See you next month, stranger," while Dad removed her from existence entirely. The non-existent daughter moved to the basement with a sleeping bag and was forbidden from appearing anywhere. During Scarlett's months, I had to coach her through phone calls on how to be me, my teachers' names, my friends' birthdays, my class schedule. During my months, she did the same. We shared one school record, one medical file, one life split between 2 girls. Everyone thought Sophie was just moody, never realizing she was actually 2 different people, living as half a person. Each bonded Scarlett and me in the most twisted way. During my off months in the basement, she'd sneak down after our parents slept and we'd whisper through the darkness. She'd tell me what happened at school as Sophie, which friends asked about me, what homework I'd need to catch up on. I'd coach her through my relationships, telling her exactly what to say to maintain my friendships. We brought whichever one of us was in the basement snacks and contraband books to read during the daylight. Anything to make those hours locked down there alone more bearable. During my month when I got my first period, I had to teach Scarlett how to use tampons through the basement door for when it would be her period next month. When she broke our arm during her month falling off a bike, I had to wear the cast during mine and pretend I remembered the accident. We kept meticulous journals documenting every interaction, every promise made, every lie told. By the time we were 14 and 15, we'd created an entire fictional person named Sophie, who was really 2 broken girls desperately trying to exist. We'd lie in the basement together during switches, holding hands and promising that someday we'd both be real at the same time. But when I was 15, I developed severe stomach pain during an off month that left me writhing on the basement floor. Scarlett begged our parents to take me to the doctor, but they refused. "Sophie can go when it's Sophie's turn," Mom said coldly. By the time my month came, I could barely stand. But at the doctor's office, all the tests came back normal. The pain had mysteriously vanished the moment I became real again. 2 weeks later, during Scarlett's month, the agony returned. I lay in the basement vomiting blood while she sat in school, healthy and terrified. We realized my body only let itself be sick when I didn't exist. The second I became Sophie again, it suppressed everything to survive my month of visibility. That night, Scarlett and I made a decision. We both walked upstairs to our parents' bedroom. "This is calling me," I told them, showing them my bloody clothes. "We need to stop the switching, please." For the first time in years, they actually seemed to listen. Mom's face softened. Dad put down his book. They looked at each other for a long moment. "You're right," Mom finally said. "This has gone on too long. We need to make a permanent decision." Relief flooded through me until I saw Dad's expression. He wasn't agreeing to let us both exist. He was solving a different problem entirely. "We'll keep one daughter," he said calmly. "The other one, well, accidents happen. Especially to sick teenage girls who don't technically exist." Mom nodded, touching my face almost tenderly. "We have a week to decide which Sophie we want to keep. You two can make it easier by telling us who deserves to live." I stumbled backward, but Mom continued in that same gentle voice. "Scarlett is younger, more adaptable, but Sophie has seniority, better grades, but she's weaker. Do we want to deal with a lifetime of these stomach issues?" She pulled a bottle of pills from her nightstand. "These are painless. Whoever we don't choose will simply go to sleep." Dad smiled at our horror. "You wanted a permanent solution. This is permanent. One daughter like we always planned. The other one never existed at all." He looked between us like he was choosing produce at the market. "So help us decide. Who's the real Sophie? Who gets to live?" Scarlett grabbed my hand, and I felt her trembling. After 15 years of sharing one life, we had 7 days to convince our parents we both deserved to exist, or one of us would disappear forever. This time, not to the basement, to the ground. That night, neither of us slept. We sat on my bed, our hands clasped so tightly our knuckles turned white. The bottle of pills Mom had shown us seemed to hover in the air between us, invisible but suffocating. 7 days. We had 7 days to convince two people who'd spent 15 years denying one of us existed, that we both deserved to live. The next morning arrived too quickly. I watched Scarlett dress in my clothes, preparing for another day pretending to be me at school. Her hands shook as she buttoned my favorite blue shirt. We'd done this routine hundreds of times, but never with death hanging over our heads. Mom made breakfast like nothing had changed. She hummed while scrambling eggs, setting one plate at the table, just one, like always. Scarlett sat down while I stood in the corner, invisible as required during her month. Dad read his newspaper, occasionally glancing between us with that calculating look I'd seen at the market when he compared prices. After Scarlett left for school, I retreated to the basement. The concrete walls felt colder than usual. I pulled out our shared journal and began writing frantically. Every memory of Scarlett being strong, being smart, being necessary. Every time she'd saved me during her months. Every reason they couldn't take her from me. Hours later, I heard footsteps on the stairs. Not Scarlett's light tread, but Mom's deliberate descent. She rarely came to the basement during off months. My stomach clenched, the familiar pain flaring. She sat on the bottom step, studying me in the dim light. Her fingers drummed against her knee as she examined my hunched posture, the way I pressed my hand against my stomach, making calculations, weighing options. She left without saying a word. When Scarlett came home, she found me curled on the basement floor, sweat beading my forehead. The pain had intensified after Mom's visit, as if my body knew it was being evaluated. Scarlett helped me sit up, wiping my face with her sleeve. That evening, we heard our parents talking in the kitchen, their voices carried through the floorboards. Mom described my condition in clinical detail. Dad responded with questions about Scarlett's academic performance. They discussed us like items on a spreadsheet, comparing assets and liabilities. Scarlett snuck down after they went to bed. She brought soup she'd hidden in her room, feeding me small spoonfuls. We didn't talk about what we'd overheard. Instead, we planned. The next day, Scarlett made mistakes at school, deliberate ones. She failed a pop quiz she could have aced. She forgot my best friend's birthday. She stumbled through a presentation I'd prepared weeks ago. When teachers asked if everything was okay, she just shrugged. Let them think Sophie was falling apart. I spent the day practicing looking healthy. I forced myself to stand straight despite the pain. I did jumping jacks until I collapsed, then did them again. If Mom came down, I wanted her to see strength, not weakness. She didn't come. That night, Scarlett reported her sabotage. Our parents had already received 2 concerned emails from teachers. Dad had frowned at dinner, asking why Sophie's grades were slipping. Mom had noticed Sophie seemed distracted, different. We were both breaking the perfect daughter they'd created. Maybe if neither of us fit their ideal, they'd have to keep us both. Or maybe we were just giving them more reasons to start fresh. On the 3rd day, I heard Dad's footsteps on the basement stairs. He moved differently than Mom, more purposeful, less observant. He carried a clipboard and pen. He asked me questions, not about my health or happiness, but about practical things. How well did I know Scarlett's routines? Could I replicate her handwriting? Did I know her teachers' names from when she attended elementary school in a different district before we moved? I lied, told him I barely knew anything about her life outside our shared Sophie identity, made myself seem incapable of taking over her existence if they chose to keep her instead. His pen scratched against paper with each answer. When he left, I vomited blood into the bucket I kept hidden behind the water heater. The stress was accelerating my condition. My body was betraying me at the worst possible time. Scarlett found me that night barely conscious. She cleaned me up, held me while I shook. We revised our plan. She would start showing signs of the same illness. I wonder what's really going through the parents' minds when they talk about their daughters like items on a shopping list. The way they're comparing grades and health problems like they're picking between 2 cars makes me curious about what kind of people could think this way about their own children. Make them think it was contagious, that keeping either of us meant dealing with a sick child. The 4th morning, Scarlett clutched her stomach at breakfast. Mom's eyes sharpened, watching as she pushed away her eggs. When Scarlett ran to the bathroom, I heard retching sounds. Real or fake, I couldn't tell. Mom followed her. Through the floorboards, I heard concerned murmurs. Scarlett playing up symptoms. Mom asking pointed questions. The bathroom door closing with finality. I spent that day writing letters. One to every friend I'd made, every teacher who'd shown kindness. If I disappeared, I wanted some record that I'd existed, that there had been 2 of us all along. I hid them in the loose brick I'd discovered years ago. Scarlett came down that night looking pale. She'd made herself sick for real, forcing herself to vomit until her throat was raw. Mom had taken her temperature, examined her closely. The performance had been convincing, too convincing. We heard our parents arguing that night. Mom wanted to make the decision immediately. Why wait if both daughters were defective? Dad insisted on the full week. He had spreadsheets to complete, variables to consider. On the 5th day, something changed. Our parents stopped discussing us when they thought we couldn't hear. The house fell silent except for necessary communication. Scarlett went to school. I stayed in the basement. Neither parent visited. The silence was worse than their debates. That night, Scarlett didn't come down immediately after our parents went to bed. I waited, pressing my ear against the door. Finally, I heard her footsteps, but they stopped at the top of the stairs. She whispered through the door that Mom had installed a padlock on the outside, keeping me in or her out. We pressed our palms against opposite sides of the door, whispering plans through the crack at the bottom. We had 2 days left. The 6th morning, I woke to find a tray of food at the bottom of the stairs. Real food, not the usual scraps. Fresh fruit, warm bread, even juice. A final meal, I realized. They'd made their decision. I didn't eat any of it. Scarlett must have noticed the lock because I heard her arguing with our parents that evening. Her voice rose higher than I'd ever heard it. Mom's responses stayed eerily calm. Dad's silence spoke volumes. I spent that day preparing, not for death, but for what Scarlett and I had whispered through the door. Our last desperate plan. Everything depended on tomorrow night. The 7th day dawned gray and cold. I felt it in my bones, even in the windowless basement. Today, our parents would announce their decision. Today, one of us was supposed to die. I heard Scarlett leave for school as usual. Our parents moved around upstairs, their footsteps creating a rhythm I'd memorized over 15 years. Mom in the kitchen, Dad in his study. The ordinary sounds of a family that had never been ordinary. At noon, I heard car doors slam, both of them leaving together. Unusual for a weekday. Were they making final preparations? Buying supplies for whatever came next? I tested the basement door. Still locked. But Scarlett and I had prepared for this. I reached under the old water heater where I'd hidden the screwdriver Scarlett had smuggled down months ago. My hands trembled as I worked on the door hinges from the inside. Each screw took forever to remove, my weakened fingers struggling with the rust. The metal scraped and protested, but finally the last screw came free. I pushed the door open carefully, hinges groaning. The hallway stretched before me, forbidden territory during Scarlett's month. My legs shook as I climbed the stairs, each step an act of rebellion against 15 years of rules. The house felt different in daylight. I'd only seen it at night during off months, sneaking to the bathroom when desperate. Now sunlight streamed through windows, illuminating dust motes that danced in the air. Everything looked sharper, more real. I found what I needed in Dad's study. His laptop sat open on the desk, still logged in. My fingers flew across the keyboard, accessing his files. Spreadsheets filled the screen. Not just about us, but about everything. Finances, insurance policies. One file made my blood run cold. Life insurance. 2 policies, both in the name Sophie. One purchased 15 years ago. One purchased last week. The beneficiaries were our parents. The payout was substantial. I photographed everything with the old digital camera Scarlett had hidden in the basement ceiling tiles. Then I searched deeper. Medical records, school documents, everything that proved 2 daughters existed, not one. Mom's car pulled into the driveway. I ran, my bare feet slapping against hardwood. I made it to the basement just as the front door opened. I pulled the door closed, holding it in place since the hinges were gone. My heart hammered as I heard Mom's heels click across the floor above. She came straight to the basement. The doorknob turned. I held my breath, pressing my weight against the door. She pushed harder. The door shifted slightly. Then her phone rang. She answered it, her voice muffled through the door. After a moment, her footsteps retreated. I heard her car start again and drive away. I spent the rest of the afternoon preparing. I wrote everything down, made copies of the photos. I hid evidence in multiple places throughout the basement. If something happened to me, Scarlett would find it. When Scarlett came home from school, she went straight to her room as instructed. I heard her moving around, following our plan. She was packing, but making it look like she wasn't. Taking things that wouldn't be missed. Preparing for what came next. Our parents returned together that evening. They called Scarlett to the living room. I pressed my ear to the basement door, straining to hear. Mom's voice carried down, explaining they'd made their decision. They would announce it tomorrow, on the actual 7th day. Tonight was for last preparations. I heard Scarlett go back upstairs. Then footsteps approached the basement door. Dad's heavy tread. He tested the lock, rattling it. Satisfied, he walked away. Hours passed. The house settled into sleep. I waited, counting minutes. At exactly 2 a.m., I heard Scarlett's signal. 3 taps on the heating vent that connected her room to the basement. I responded with 3 taps of my own. Then I got to work. The loose brick came free easily after years of practice. But instead of hiding something, I retrieved what I'd placed there earlier. The bottle of pills from Mom's nightstand. I'd taken them during my escape to Dad's study. I crushed 2 pills into powder, then carefully returned the bottle to its hiding spot. The powder went into a small envelope I'd made from notebook paper. This was our insurance policy. The next morning, I heard Scarlett getting ready for school, but then Mom's voice, telling her to stay home. Today was too important for school. My stomach dropped. We hadn't planned for this. I heard them all in the kitchen. Breakfast sounds, normal family noises that weren't normal at all. Then footsteps approaching the basement. Multiple sets. The door opened. All 3 of them stood there. Mom held a tray with breakfast. Real breakfast. Eggs, bacon, toast. Dad carried 2 chairs. Scarlett's face was pale but determined. They set up the chairs in the basement. Mom placed the tray on a box between them. Then she and Dad sat down, looking at us expectantly. Mom explained their decision process, how they'd weighed every factor, how they'd considered our futures, how they'd thought about what was best for everyone. Her voice stayed calm, reasonable, like she was explaining a vacation plan, not a murder. Dad pulled out his clipboard. He read statistics about single children versus siblings, success rates, happiness indexes, cost analyses, all supporting their choice to keep just one. I watched Scarlett's face as they talked. She kept her expression neutral, but I saw her hand slip into her pocket. The envelope. She had it. Mom stood up, smoothing her skirt. She announced they'd chosen to keep Scarlett. I was older, sicker, more damaged by years of basement living. Scarlett had more potential, more years ahead. It was the logical choice. She pulled out the med bottle. My heart raced, but I kept my face blank. She poured a glass of water from a pitcher she'd brought. Then she held both out to me. I looked at the pills, then at Scarlett. She gave the tiniest nod. I reached for the bottle, but then Scarlett stood up. She snatched the water glass from Mom's hand and drank it all in one gulp. Mom frowned, started to speak. Scarlett grabbed the pitcher and poured another glass. She drank that too. Mom's annoyance turned to confusion. She demanded to know what Scarlett was doing. Scarlett just smiled and poured another glass. This time she held it out to me. I understood. I took the glass and drank deeply. The water tasted normal. Scarlett poured another. We passed it between us, drinking glass after glass. Mom and Dad exchanged looks. Then Scarlett did something unexpected. She took the med bottle from Mom's hand. Before anyone could react, she opened it and poured pills into her palm. She pretended to count them, then frowned. She showed the bottle to our parents, asked why there were only 18 pills when there should be 20. Mom snatched the bottle back, counted for herself. 2 pills were missing. Scarlett pulled the envelope from her pocket. She opened it slowly, showing the white powder inside. Then she looked at the empty water pitcher, at the glasses we'd been drinking from. Our parents went very still. Scarlett explained she'd found the powder in the water pitcher that morning. She'd assumed it was sugar or something harmless. But now, seeing the missing pills, she wasn't sure. We'd both hammered so much water. If those were the missing pills. Mom's face went white. She grabbed the med bottle, reading the label. Something about Mom grabbing that med bottle and reading the label seems oddly telling. She knows exactly what those pills do, but I'm curious why she needs to check the label now. Dad stood up so fast his chair fell over. They both looked at us, then at each other. I started swaying, just a little at first, then more dramatically. Scarlett caught me as I pretended to stumble. She was swaying too now. We held each other up, two sisters poisoned by our parents' own weapon. Mom screamed at us to throw up, to get it out of our systems. Dad ran upstairs, presumably to call 911, but Scarlett held up her hand. She explained there was another option. We could all pretend this never happened. We walk out of this house, both of us, alive and free. Or they could explain to the paramedics why their daughters were poisoned with pills from Mom's nightstand. Pills prescribed to Mom. Pills that would show up in a toxicology report. I let myself slide to the floor, still conscious but playing up the effects. Scarlett knelt beside me, then looked at our parents. She asked them what mattered more, their perfect single-daughter plan, or avoiding prison for attempted murder. Mom was crying now, real tears. She begged us to tell her we hadn't really hammered the powder, that this was a trick. Scarlett just stared at her, swaying slightly. Dad came back downstairs, phone in hand. He hadn't called anyone yet. He looked between his wife and his daughters. His face showed the calculations, the risk assessment, the cost-benefit analysis of letting us die versus letting us go. Scarlett made it simple for him. She pulled out the digital camera. She showed them the screen, the insurance policies, the spreadsheets, the evidence that two daughters existed. She explained she'd already uploaded everything to a cloud account. If we died, the police would receive an anonymous tip about where to look. But if we lived, if we left, the evidence would stay hidden. We'd disappear. They'd never have to see us again. They could tell people their daughter ran away. They could play the grieving parents. They could start over. I watched our parents crumble. 15 years of control, shattered by two desperate girls and their own pills. Mom sank into the chair, sobbing. Dad stood frozen, phone still in hand. Scarlett helped me stand. We climbed the basement stairs together, leaving our parents in the dark where they'd kept us for so long. In my room, we grabbed the bags Scarlett had packed, money she'd stolen from Mom's purse over months, clothes that would fit us both, our shared journal, the camera, everything that mattered. We walked through the house one last time, past the living room where we'd switched places monthly, past the kitchen where only one plate ever sat at the table, past our parents' bedroom where they'd made their monstrous decision. Mom and Dad didn't try to stop us. They sat in the basement staring at nothing. The med bottle lay on the floor between them, evidence of their choice, proof of what they'd become. At the front door, Scarlett turned back. She called down to them that the powder in the pitcher had been flour. We hadn't hammered any pills. We were fine. But they should remember this feeling, this terror. This was how we'd lived for 15 years. We walked out into the afternoon sun, two girls who'd shared one life, finally free to be ourselves. We had no plan beyond escape, no money beyond what Scarlett had stolen, no identity beyond the shared one we'd created. But we had each other, and for the first time in our lives, that was enough. We made it 3 blocks before the adrenaline wore off. I collapsed on a bus bench, the familiar pain flaring in my stomach. But this time, Scarlett was there in daylight. She held me as I shook, rubbed my back as I fought nausea. A woman walking her dog stopped to ask if we needed help. For 15 years, no one had seen us together. No one had known to help. Now this stranger offered water from her bottle, asked if she should call someone. Scarlett thanked her but said we were fine. We were just sisters, dealing with a family situation. The woman nodded knowingly and walked on. Sisters. We were sisters in public, in daylight, acknowledged and real. We took the bus downtown. Scarlett had researched shelters, places that helped teenagers. She'd memorized addresses during her school months, preparing for this possibility. We found one that didn't ask too many questions, that understood sometimes home wasn't safe. The intake worker looked at our matching faces, our shared features. She asked if we were twins. We said yes, and it felt like the first truth we'd told in years. She didn't question why we only had one ID between us, why our stories were vague. She'd seen enough to know when not to push. That night, we lay in separate beds for the first time in our lives. The shelter room was small, basic, but it was ours. No basement, no switching, no pretending one of us didn't exist. I thought about our parents, alone in their perfect house with their perfect plan destroyed. They'd wanted one daughter and ended up with none. The irony wasn't lost on me. Scarlett whispered across the gap between our beds. She asked if I regretted leaving, if I thought we should have handled it differently. I told her no. We'd survived 15 years of being erased. We'd earned our freedom. The next few days blurred together. The shelter helped us figure out next steps. Legal aid, documentation, how to prove we both existed when only one of us was ever recorded. It would be a long process, they warned. Complicated, but possible. I had to see a doctor about my stomach. The years of suppressing illness had done damage, but it was treatable, the doctor said. Now that I could exist full-time, my body could finally heal properly. No more hiding pain. No more waiting for my turn to be real. Scarlett started the process of getting her own identity documents. Birth certificate first, then everything else. The legal aid lawyer said our case was unusual but not unprecedented. Hidden children, erased identities. It happened more than people knew. We gave the lawyer the evidence we'd collected. The photos of Dad's spreadsheets, the insurance policies, our journal documenting 15 years of switches. She said it was enough to build a case if we wanted to pursue it. We said we'd think about it. A week into our stay at the shelter, Scarlett's phone rang. Mom's number. We'd kept the phone, knowing they might try to contact us. Scarlett put it on speaker. Mom's voice was different, smaller. She asked if we were okay, if we were safe. She said they'd been to the police, reported us as runaways, but they hadn't mentioned the pills, hadn't mentioned there were 2 of us, just said their daughter Sophie had left home. She wanted to meet, to talk, to work something out. Dad had ideas, she said, ways to make this work, ways to fix things. Her voice cracked when she said she missed us, both of us. Scarlett looked at me. I shook my head. We'd spent 15 years believing their lies, accepting their twisted love. We wouldn't go back to being half people. Not for them, not for anyone. Scarlett told Mom we were never coming back. We were building our own lives now. Separate lives, real lives. If they wanted to help, they could start by admitting to authorities that they had 2 daughters. They could correct 15 years of lies. Mom started crying. She said we didn't understand. It had been so hard. The financial pressure, the emotional strain. They'd done their best with an impossible situation. They'd never meant for it to go so far. I took the phone from Scarlett. I told Mom that that their best had nearly culled me, that their love had been conditional, fractional, deadly, that they'd had choices, and they'd chosen cruelty. Now we were choosing ourselves. I hung up before she could respond. That night, I dreamed about the basement, but in the dream, the door was open. Light poured in. Scarlett and I walked out together, hand in hand. Behind us, the basement filled with water until it was just a reflection of the sky. The phone call changed everything. 2 days later, Dad showed up at the shelter alone. The receptionist called us down, and we found him sitting in the lobby, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. His usual calculating expression had been replaced by something hollow. He explained that Mom had taken the pills herself the night after we left. Not to die, he insisted, but to understand what we'd gone through. She'd miscalculated the dose. The hospital pumped her stomach, but the damage was done. Her liver was failing. She needed us to come see her. Scarlett and I exchanged glances. This could be another manipulation, another trap, but the receptionist confirmed she'd called the hospital. Mom was really there, really sick. We agreed to go, but only together, and only for an hour. The hospital smelled like disinfectant and despair. Mom lay propped against pillows, her skin yellowed from liver damage. When she saw us together, actually together in public, tears leaked from her eyes. She reached out weakly, then let her hand drop. She whispered apologies through cracked lips, not the calculated kind we'd heard before, but raw, broken words. She explained how it had started. Postpartum psychosis after Scarlett's birth. Dad's solution to hide one child rather than get her help. By the time she recovered, the pattern was set. The lie had grown too big to undo. Dad stood by the window, not looking at us. He added details Mom was too weak to share. The financial strain of keeping the secret, bribing a doctor to falsify records, moving whenever questions arose. The insurance policies were meant as college funds, he claimed, in case something happened to them. We didn't believe him, but it didn't matter anymore. Mom's breathing grew labored. She begged us to forgive her, to understand. We couldn't give her that. 15 years of erasure couldn't be forgiven in an hour. But Scarlett took her hand anyway. I stood back, my stomach churning with familiar pain. The nurse came in to give Mom medication. As we turned to leave, Mom called out weakly. The timing of Mom taking those pills herself feels way too convenient. Like she knew exactly what story would bring them back to her bedside. This whole hospital scene with the tearful confessions and Dad's sudden willingness to explain everything makes me wonder if they planned this final performance together. She'd written something, she said. A confession. Everything about what they'd done. It was with her lawyer. If we wanted it, if we needed it for our documentation, it was ours. We left without promising anything. Back at the shelter, we processed what had happened. Mom's confession could fast-track our legal existence, but using it meant engaging with our past, with them. The lawyer advised us to take it. Practical trumped emotional, she said. 3 days later, Mom died. Dad called the shelter, his voice flat. The funeral would be small, family only. We were welcome if we wanted to come. If not, he understood. He'd be moving after everything was settled. Somewhere new, somewhere without memories. We didn't go to the funeral. Instead, we met with Mom's lawyer. The confession was more detailed than we'd expected. Names, dates, every switch documented. How they'd fooled the school system, the medical fraud, everything we needed to prove we were two people, not one. The lawyer also revealed something unexpected. Mom had changed her will in the hospital. Everything went to us, split equally. The house, savings, even those insurance policies. Dad had agreed to it. Blood money maybe, but money we desperately needed. We met Dad one last time to sign papers. He looked older, grayer. He handed over keys, documents, our birth certificates. Scarlett's hidden all these years. He spoke only when necessary, his voice mechanical. Before leaving, he paused at the door. He told us he was sorry, not for what they'd done. He still believed they'd tried their best with an impossible situation, but sorry we'd suffered, sorry we'd had to save ourselves. Then he left, and we never saw him again. The house felt different without them. Scarlett and I walked through rooms that had been forbidden during our off months. We found evidence everywhere. 2 toothbrushes in the bathroom cabinet, 2 sets of baby clothes in the attic. They'd kept everything, just hidden it. In Mom's closet, we discovered photo albums, pictures of us as babies, labeled Sophie 1 and Sophie 2, before they'd committed to the switching. Videos on an old camcorder showed Mom holding us both, looking overwhelmed but normal. Before the break, before the system, we couldn't live there. Too many ghosts. But selling the house would take time, and we needed stability for the legal process, so we compromised. We lived there temporarily, but changed everything. Painted walls, moved furniture, made it ours. The documentation process moved faster with Mom's confession. Birth certificates were reissued, social security numbers assigned, school records separated. Each form filed felt like recovering a piece of ourselves. Scarlett chose to keep her name. I considered changing mine, but decided Sophie was mine as much as theirs. My health improved slowly. Without the stress of switching, my stomach began healing. The doctor explained it was psychosomatic, my body's response to extreme stress. Regular treatment helped, but I'd always carry the damage, physical proof of what survival had cost. Scarlett enrolled in school properly, her own records, her own name. She was behind academically from all the missed months, but she caught up quickly. Teachers who'd known Sophie were confused by the sudden changes, but the principal, informed of our situation, kept questions at bay. I took online classes to finish high school. Being in a classroom felt too exposed after years of hiding, but I excelled at independent study. All those basement hours reading contraband books had prepared me for self-directed learning. We sold the house after 6 months. A young couple bought it, excited about the basement's potential as a game room. We didn't tell them about the scratches on the doorframe where we'd marked our height during off months. Some histories didn't need preserving. With the house money and Mom's savings, we rented a small apartment near the university. 2 bedrooms, 2 names on the lease. Every piece of paper with both our names felt like a victory. Proof we both existed, simultaneously, legally. The insurance policies paid out eventually. We donated half to the shelter that had helped us. The rest went into savings for college. Blood money transformed into future possibilities. A year after leaving, we got a letter forwarded from Dad's lawyer. Dad had settled somewhere in Maine, working at a hardware store. He included no return address, just wanted us to know he was alive. He ended with, "I think of you both every day." We didn't respond. Scarlett started dating someone from her study group. She was nervous about explaining our past, but he listened without judgment. When he came for dinner, he brought 2 desserts, one for each of us. Such a small gesture, but it made Scarlett cry. Recognition, normalcy. I struggled more with relationships. Trust came hard when your parents had tried to erase you. But I found solace in art therapy, painting what I couldn't say. Abstract pieces full of basements and shadows, but also light breaking through. The therapist said trauma could become transformation. I was skeptical but kept painting. 2 years later, Scarlett graduated high school properly. I attended the ceremony, cheering from the audience. Her diploma had her name only. No shared identity. No switching required. Just Scarlett, walking across the stage as herself. I'd finished my GED and started community college. Psychology major. I wanted to understand what had broken in our parents. Not to forgive, but to recognize the signs. To help other hidden children. They existed more than people knew. We kept our shared journal but added separate ones. Individual thoughts. Individual dreams. The shared one became a historical document. Proof of our survival. Sometimes we read entries aloud, marveling at how we'd endured. 3 years after leaving, we received word that Dad had died. Heart attack at work. His landlord found our contact information among his things. He'd lived alone, spoke to no one about family, but his apartment was full of our photos. School pictures he'd somehow obtained. Newspaper clipping of Scarlett's honor roll mention. He'd been watching from afar. We handled his arrangements because no one else would. A simple burial next to Mom. Whatever they'd become, they'd created us. We couldn't forgive, but we could offer this final dignity. At the grave, Scarlett left the bottle of Hills that had saved us. I left a photo, the last one of all 4 of us together, before the switching began. Time helped, though it didn't heal everything. My stomach would always be sensitive. Scarlett still checked locks obsessively. We both struggled with birthdays, unsure which ones really counted, but we built lives. Real ones. Separate but connected. 5 years after leaving, I graduated with my psychology degree. Scarlett was in nursing school. We'd moved to a bigger apartment, each decorating our own space. Mine was minimalist, craving the light denied in basements. Hers was cozy, filled with proof of existence. Photos, certificates, anything with her name. We hosted dinner parties now. Friends who knew our story and some who didn't. We'd learned to summarize it simply. We were raised in an unusual situation. Most people didn't push. Those who did heard what they could handle. The switching anniversary still hit hard each month. We'd spend those midnights together, usually watching movies or playing cards, reclaiming the time that had been stolen, making new memories to overlay the old. 7 years later, Scarlett got married. I was her maid of honor. When the officiant asked who gave her away, we'd arranged for him to say, she gives herself. Because she did. We both did. No one owned us anymore. I published research on hidden children. Academic work, not memoir. Our story was ours to keep or share as we chose. But the research helped change how social services looked for signs, how teachers recognized inconsistencies. Small changes, but meaningful. 10 years after leaving, we stood in that hospital again. Different wing, different reason. Scarlett was having her first child. As I held my nephew, I promised him he'd never doubt his existence, never share his name, never disappear. He'd be whole from the start. We were Sophie and Scarlett, 2 sisters who'd shared one life and survived, who'd chosen existence over erasure, who'd saved each other when no one else would. We were real. We were separate. We were together. We were free. Appreciate you sticking with me while I tried to make sense of all this. A lot of questions, not a ton of answers, but honestly, that's kind of the fun of it. Take care, and I'll see you when the next one gets weird.
My mom created a golden child system where only the sibling with the highest GPA got hot meals, a bedroom, and goodnight hugs, while the rest of us got nothing. When I refused to sabotage my siblings like she wanted, she made me sleep on a mattress in the garage and eat standing at the counter. Then I got a 2 a.m. call from my youngest sister, whispering for help from the basement, where Mom had locked her for burning her tests, and I found her down to 89 pounds with infected cuts on her arms.
Growing up, my parents only rewarded us for one thing, getting better grades than each other. I remember being 6 years old coming home with a B while my brother came home with an A. He got takeout that night, stayed up past bedtime watching cartoons, and went toy shopping. I got his cold leftovers and slept without blankets in the middle of January. My mom called it the golden child system. Every report card day, she'd line me and my 3 siblings up in the living room and go through our grades one by one. Whoever had the highest GPA became the golden child that semester. They got everything. Hot meals, their own room with heat, goodnight hugs, weekend trips to the mall. The rest of us got nothing. At first, my siblings and I just tried harder. I stayed up late studying with a flashlight under my covers. My younger brother Piper would read during recess. My sister Ava practiced math problems during lunch. But then something changed around middle school. My youngest sister Lynn started putting sleeping pills in Piper's morning orange juice before big tests. Ava would delete my essays from the family computer and claim it was a glitch. Piper started hiding my textbooks. Mom loved it. She'd find Ava's stash of my homework and smile. Smart girl, she'd say. You understand how the world works. I was the oldest and maybe the stupidest because I refused to play their game. When I caught Lynn crying over her failed science test, I helped her study for the retake. When Piper's calculator broke before his algebra final, I lent him mine. I kept thinking if I showed them kindness, we'd stop sabotaging each other. But then Mom caught me helping Lynn with her biology homework one night. She grabbed my hair and yanked me out of the chair so hard I felt strands rip from my scalp. She dragged me to my room and shoved me against the wall. You're making her weak, she hissed in my face. Her breath smelled like wine. After that night, she moved my mattress to the garage because failures didn't deserve comfort and took my bedroom door off its hinges because privacy was for winners. I ate dinner standing at the kitchen counter while my siblings sat at the table. The worst part was watching their faces. They looked guilty but never said anything. They were too scared of Mom. That night I decided I would rebel in my own way by maintaining a C average through high school, just enough to pass, but low enough to let Mom know she couldn't break me. My siblings, on the other hand, all had stellar GPAs, all had scholarship offers, but they also had ulcers and anxiety attacks and prescriptions they hid from each other. Ava got hospitalized junior year for taking too much Adderall. It all came to a head the night before graduation. Mom changed the locks while I was at work. I came home to my stuff thrown on the lawn. My baby pictures were torn up and scattered in the driveway. My mom stood in the doorway with her arms around my siblings. Don't come back until you're worth something, she said. I could see Lynn opening her mouth like she was going to say something until Mom shot her a dagger that made her face turn pale. She said nothing. They all watched me load my car in the rain and nobody helped. My graduation the next day had 4 empty reserved seats in the front row. College was weird at first. My roommate's parents visited for Thanksgiving and brought me a pie because they felt bad I was staying on campus. His mom hugged me and I flinched so hard I knocked over a lamp. My psychology professor complimented my essay and I had a panic attack in the bathroom because I was waiting for the punishment. I slept on the floor for a month because the bed felt wrong, too soft and unearned. I called home once to check on my siblings about halfway through the semester to ask how things were going. What I was told upset me, but it didn't surprise me. Piper said all my siblings had started recording each other's conversations to catch mistakes. Lynn had hidden cameras set up in Ava's room to catch her cheating or not studying so she could report to Mom. Ava had started stealing Piper's medication. The competition was worse without me there. Someone had to lose for the others to win. It was absolutely heartbreaking to hear. I started thinking of a way out for my siblings. I was getting somewhere, and that's when last week Lynn called me. Her voice was shaking and she was whispering like Mom might hear through the wall. walls. "I can't survive this anymore," she said. "Please come save us. I'm so sorry for everything." I remember hearing a loud thud right after, followed by my mom yelling something incoherent. I tried to yell, but the line went dead. It was 2 a.m., but I still ran outside and got in my car to make the 4-hour journey home. When I got there, I found Lynn locked in the basement. Turns out Mom had converted it into a study room with no windows and a lock on the outside. Lynn was down to 89 pounds. She showed me infected cuts on her arms from stress scratching. She'd been burning her test to stay off Mom's achievement board, but Mom caught her. She hadn't been allowed to use the bathroom in 3 days. There were buckets in the corner. Mom came running down screaming about how I was ruining her winter. I carried Lynn to my car while Mom followed us outside shrieking that we were both failures and we deserved each other. As I drove away, Lynn was half conscious in the passenger seat. I kept checking the rearview mirror as we drove, half expecting to see Mom's car following us. Lynn had passed out completely, her breathing shallow but steady. The hospital was another hour away, and I pressed harder on the gas pedal. When we finally arrived at the emergency room, the nurses took one look at Lynn and rushed her straight back. I filled out paperwork with shaking hands, listing myself as her emergency contact. The receptionist asked about insurance, and I handed over my student card, praying my university coverage would work. 3 hours later, a doctor came out to talk to me. Lynn was severely malnourished and dehydrated. The cuts on her arms were infected and needed antibiotics. They wanted to keep her for observation. I nodded at everything he said, trying not to think about how I'd pay for it all. Lynn woke up around noon the next day. She looked so small in the hospital bed, hooked up to IV fluids. When she saw me sitting in the chair beside her, tears started rolling down her cheeks. I grabbed her hand and squeezed it gently. She squeezed back, and we sat like that for a long time without talking. Eventually, she told me everything. How Mom had gotten worse after I left. How the competition between siblings had turned vicious. How she'd been locked in that basement for 2 weeks, only let out for an hour each day to shower and change clothes. The nurse brought Lynn some broth and crackers. She ate slowly, wincing with each swallow. I helped her sit up and adjust the pillows behind her back. When she finished eating, she looked at me with hollow eyes. I knew what she was asking without her saying it. Could we go back for Piper and Ava? Were they suffering too? Part of me wanted to say no. They'd watched Mom throw my stuff on the lawn. They'd participated in the sabotage for years. But then I remembered they were victims too, just trying to survive in their own ways. That evening, I called Piper from the hospital lobby. He answered on the 3rd ring, his voice hushed. I told him Lynn was safe and asked if he wanted to leave too. There was a long pause. Then he hung up. I tried calling back, but he didn't answer. I tried Ava next. She picked up immediately, almost like she'd been waiting. Before I could say anything, she started talking fast. Mom knew I'd taken Lynn. She was furious. She'd already changed the locks again and installed security cameras. Ava's voice cracked as she told me Mom had moved all of Lynn's belongings to the curb and burned them in the backyard. I asked Ava if she wanted out. Another long pause. Then she whispered that she couldn't talk anymore and hung up. I stood in that hospital lobby feeling helpless. How could I save people who didn't want to be saved? Lynn was released after 4 days. The bill was astronomical, but the hospital set up a payment plan. I drove us back to my college apartment, stopping at a thrift store to buy her some clothes and basic necessities. My roommate was gone for winter break, so Lynn took his bed. Those first few days were rough. Lynn jumped at every sound. She'd wake up screaming from nightmares. She kept apologizing for things that weren't her fault. I made her simple meals and didn't push her to talk. Slowly, she started to relax. She even smiled once when I burned our mac and cheese because I was distracted doing homework. A week after we'd left, my phone rang at 3 a.m. It was Piper. His voice was shaking. Mom had found his hidden stash of anxiety medication and flushed it all. He was going through withdrawal and didn't know what to do. I told him to pack a bag and meet me at the gas station 2 blocks from the house. I left Lynn sleeping and drove through the night again. Piper was waiting at the gas station, hunched over with a backpack. He looked terrible, sweating, shaking, dark circles under his eyes. He climbed into my car without a word. The drive back was silent except for Piper's occasional groans. I stopped at a 24-hour pharmacy and explained the situation to the pharmacist. She couldn't give him medication without a prescription, but she suggested an urgent care clinic that opened at 7 a.m. We waited in the parking lot until they opened. The doctor at urgent care was understanding. He prescribed a small amount of medication to help with withdrawal and gave us a referral to a psychiatrist. Piper took the first dose right there in the exam room. When we got back to my apartment, Lynn was awake and making coffee. She froze when she saw Piper, then ran over and hugged him. He hugged her back, and they both started crying. I left them alone and went to take a shower, letting the hot water wash away the exhaustion. Over the next few days, the 3 of us developed a routine. I went to classes while they stayed in the apartment. Lynn started teaching herself to cook from YouTube videos. Piper organized my bookshelf and cleaned obsessively, needing something to control. In the evenings, we'd eat dinner together at my tiny kitchen table. Nobody sat on the floor or stood at the counter. Then Ava called. Mom had kicked her out. She'd caught Ava trying to call me and went ballistic. Ava was at a friend's house but couldn't stay there long. I gave her my address and told her to take a bus. She arrived the next evening with a suitcase and a black eye. Mom had hit her with a textbook. We didn't talk about it. I just got her some ice and made up a bed on the couch. That night, all 4 of us were together for the first time in years without Mom hovering over us. But I knew this was just the beginning. Mom wouldn't let us go that easily. She'd already left dozens of voicemails calling us ungrateful failures. She'd shown up at my university looking for me, but campus security turned her away. She'd filed a missing persons report for Lynn, claiming I'd kidnapped her. The police showed up at my apartment to do a welfare check. Lynn told them she was 18 and had left voluntarily. They seemed satisfied and left, but I knew Mom would try something else. She always had another move planned. My siblings were struggling too. They'd been conditioned for so long to compete with each other that cooperation felt foreign. Ava hoarded food in her suitcase. Piper timed how long everyone used the bathroom. Lynn apologized constantly for taking up space. Old habits died hard. We needed help. Real professional help. I made appointments with the counseling center at my university. They had a sliding scale payment option. I also reached out to legal aid about getting restraining orders. The lawyer said we had a strong case given the documented abuse. But even as I tried to build us a new life, I could feel Mom's presence looming. She knew where I went to school. She had ways of finding information, and she'd never admit defeat. The golden child system had been her life's work. We were her trophies, her proof that her methods worked. I started varying my route to class, checking over my shoulder constantly. I installed new locks on my apartment door and a security bar for extra protection. I taught my siblings our emergency plan if Mom showed up. We were living in fear, but at least we were living. One morning, I woke up to find a note slipped under my door. Mom's handwriting. "You can't hide forever. A real family sticks together. Come home before it's too late." My hands shook as I read it. She'd been here. She'd stood right outside while we slept. I showed the note to my siblings at breakfast. Lynn went pale. Piper's hands started trembling, but Ava surprised me. She grabbed the note and tore it into pieces. "She can't control us anymore," she said firmly. It was the first time any of them had shown defiance. That afternoon, we all went to the counseling center together. The therapist was kind but direct. She explained that what we'd experienced was severe psychological abuse, that Mom's system had pitted us against each other to maintain control, that healing would take time and effort from all of us. As we walked back to my apartment after the session, something felt different. We were walking side by side instead of in a line. Nobody was checking to see who was walking faster or straighter. For the first time, we felt like actual siblings instead of competitors. But I knew our fight wasn't over. Mom was still out there, planning her next move, and we were still learning how to trust each other after years of sabotage and betrayal. The road ahead would be long and difficult, but at least now, we were walking it together. That night, as we sat around my small living room doing homework and watching TV, I realized something. We might have lost our childhood to mom's twisted system, but we still had a chance at a future. A real future where love wasn't conditional on achievement and family meant support instead of competition. The next morning brought an unexpected development. Piper discovered mom had canceled his health insurance. The psychiatrist appointment we'd scheduled was now impossible without paying out of pocket. He paced the apartment, pulling at his hair while I made frantic calls to the university health center. They could see him in 2 weeks, but his medication would run out before then. Lynn suggested we try different pharmacies to see if anyone would help. We spent the entire day driving from one to another, explaining our situation. Each pharmacist shook their heads sympathetically but firmly. Without a valid prescription, they couldn't help. Piper grew more agitated with each rejection, his withdrawal symptoms worsening. That evening, Ava surprised us all. She'd been quietly researching online and found a telehealth service that could prescribe medication after a video consultation. The appointment cost $89, which meant I'd have to skip groceries for the week, but Piper needed help immediately. We huddled around my laptop as he spoke with the doctor, who prescribed a week's worth of medication to bridge the gap. Relief washed over Piper's face when he swallowed the first med, but our victory was short-lived. Mom had been busy. She'd called my university claiming I was mentally unstable and holding my siblings hostage. The dean of students left a voicemail requesting an urgent meeting. My stomach churned as I listened to the message 3 times. I went to the meeting alone, armed with documentation from the hospital about Lynn's condition. The dean listened patiently as I explained our family situation. She seemed sympathetic, but warned that any disruption to my academic performance or campus life would have consequences. I left her office feeling like I was walking a tightrope. When I returned to the apartment, I found my siblings huddled together on the couch. They'd received a package. Inside was a photo album filled with pictures from our childhood, happy moments before the golden child system started. There was a note in mom's handwriting. Remember when we were a real family? It's not too late to come home. Lynn started crying. Piper stared at a photo of all of us at the beach, back when we still smiled genuinely. Even Ava seemed affected, tracing her finger over a picture of mom pushing her on a swing. I wanted to grab the album and throw it away, but I couldn't. These were the only photos we had left of our childhood. The emotional manipulation continued. Mom started sending individual texts to each sibling, tailored to their specific vulnerabilities. She promised Piper she'd refill all his medications if he came home. She told Ava she'd already set aside money for her graduate school. She assured Lynn that the basement was being renovated into a proper bedroom. I watched my siblings' faces as they read these messages, the doubt creeping in, the longing for a mother who'd never truly existed. We'd escaped physically, but mom still had hooks in their minds. Years of conditioning didn't disappear overnight. Ava was the first to crack. I came home from class to find her packing her suitcase. She couldn't meet my eyes as she explained that mom had promised to pay for her law school applications. All she had to do was come home for a week to talk things through. I tried reasoning with her, reminding her of the black eye that had barely faded, but Ava's ambition had always been her weakness, and mom knew exactly which buttons to push. I drove Ava to the bus station in silence. At the departure gate, she hugged me quickly and whispered an apology. Mom slipping notes under doors like some kind of reverse tooth fairy who takes your peace of mind instead of teeth. That's next level creepy. I watched her board the bus, knowing in my gut that this was a mistake, but I couldn't force her to stay. That would make me no better than mom. The apartment felt emptier without Ava. Lynn and Piper grew quieter, probably wondering if they should leave too. I threw myself into keeping them busy. We cooked elaborate meals together, played board games, went for walks around campus. Anything to avoid thinking about what Ava might be experiencing back home. 3 days passed with no word from Ava. Her phone went straight to voicemail. Mom posted photos on social media of Ava studying at the dining room table, looking perfectly normal, but I knew those photos were staged. Everything in that house was a performance. On the 4th day, Piper's phone rang during dinner. It was Ava, but something was wrong. Her voice sounded flat, rehearsed. She told Piper that living with me was a mistake, that I was holding them back from their potential, that mom had their best interests at heart. Piper put the call on speaker, and we all heard mom whispering in the background, coaching Ava on what to say. After Ava hung up, we sat in stunned silence. Mom had broken her in just 4 days. Or maybe Ava was playing along to survive. Either way, she was lost to us for now. Lynn grabbed my hand under the table, and I squeezed it reassuringly. We couldn't save someone who didn't want to be saved. The next phase of mom's campaign was more aggressive. She started showing up at my university at random times. I'd spot her car in the parking lot after class. She'd be sitting in the student union when I went for coffee, always watching, never approaching, just reminding me that she could reach me whenever she wanted. Campus security couldn't do much since she wasn't technically harassing anyone. She had every right to be in public spaces. I started taking different routes, ducking into buildings when I saw her, feeling like prey being stalked. My grades began to slip from the stress. One afternoon, I returned from class to find my apartment door slightly open. My heart pounded as I pushed it wider. The place had been searched, nothing stolen, but everything moved slightly. Drawers opened, papers shuffled, beds disturbed. The message was clear. Mom could get to us even here. Lynn and Piper were at the library, thankfully. I called them and told them to stay there while I filed a report with campus police. The officer took notes but seemed skeptical. No forced entry, nothing missing. Without evidence, they couldn't do much. I felt the walls closing in. That night, we pushed the couch against the door and took turns keeping watch. None of us slept well. In the morning, I found another note under the door. Stop this foolishness. You're hurting your siblings. A good daughter would bring them home. I was running out of money. Between the extra food, Piper's medication, and the security measures, my savings were depleted. I picked up extra shifts at the campus bookstore, but it wasn't enough. Lynn offered to find a job, but she didn't have any documents. Mom had destroyed them all. The financial pressure was part of mom's plan. She knew I couldn't support 3 people on a student budget. She was waiting for us to get desperate enough to come crawling back. I started skipping meals so my siblings could eat. They noticed but didn't say anything. 2 weeks after Ava left, she called again. This time, her voice was different, urgent. She spoke quickly, saying mom was at her weekly wine club. Ava told us that mom had locked her in her room at night, that she'd been forced to study for the LSAT 16 hours a day, that mom had taken her phone and only let her use it for supervised calls. Before we could respond, we heard a door slam in the background. Ava gasped and hung up. We tried calling back, but the number was blocked. I wanted to drive there immediately, but Lynn pointed out it could be a trap. Mom might be using Ava to lure us back. We spent hours debating what to do. Piper thought we should call the police, but what would we say? That a 20-year-old was studying too much? Lynn suggested we try to sneak Ava out during mom's wine club, but we didn't know when that was. I felt paralyzed by indecision. The next morning changed everything. Mom had escalated beyond psychological warfare. She'd called my employer claiming I'd stolen from the register. She'd contacted my professors saying I was cheating on assignments. She'd even reached out to my roommate's parents with lies about substance use in our apartment. I spent the entire day in damage control mode. My manager reviewed security footage that proved I'd never stolen anything. My professors were understanding but concerned. My roommate's parents were harder to convince. The stress was overwhelming. Mom was systematically trying to destroy the life I'd built. Lynn and Piper watched me field phone calls and emails, their faces grave. They understood now that mom wouldn't stop. She'd keep escalating until we either returned or were completely destroyed. There was no middle ground in her world. world. That evening, I made a decision. We couldn't keep playing defense. We needed to go on the offensive, but not in the way Mom expected. Instead of fighting her directly, we'd make ourselves impossible to find. It was time to disappear completely. I researched cities far from our hometown, places where Mom had no connections, where we could start fresh with new identities, at least socially. It would mean dropping out of school, leaving everything behind. But what choice did we have? Lynn was immediately on board. She had nothing left to lose. Piper was more hesitant. His medication situation made moving complicated. But after Mom sent him photos of his old room with the caption, "Waiting for you," he agreed. We couldn't leave Ava behind though. Somehow we had to get her out first. I spent the next week quietly preparing. I withdrew my remaining savings in cash, packed our few belongings into boxes, gave notice at my job, telling them I had a family emergency. My professors were understanding when I explained I needed to take a leave of absence. Meanwhile, we worked on a plan to extract Ava. Lynn had an idea. She still had the password to an old email account Ava had forgotten about. We could communicate through drafts, never sending anything that Mom could intercept. It was risky, but it was our only shot. The first draft we left was simple. "We're getting out. All of us. Be ready." We checked obsessively for a response. 2 days later, Ava had written back, "Mom watches everything. Wine club is Thursday 7 to 10 p.m. Back door broken lock." We had a window, a 3-hour opportunity while Mom was out, but it would mean driving back to the house we'd fled from, walking back into the trap. Everything in me screamed that this was a bad idea, but I couldn't abandon Ava. I rented a car under a friend's name, paying cash. We drove through the night, arriving in our hometown as the sun rose. We parked several blocks away and waited. The neighborhood looked exactly the same. Normal houses with normal families. No one would guess the horror inside that perfect suburban home. Thursday evening came slowly. We watched from our car as Mom left for wine club, dressed impeccably as always. We waited another 15 minutes to make sure she wasn't coming back. Then we moved quickly. The back door was indeed broken, just as Ava had said. We slipped inside silently. The house smelled like lemon cleaner and something else. Fear. I remembered that smell from my childhood. We found Ava in her room, already packed. She looked thinner, with dark circles under her eyes, but she was ready. We were almost to the back door when we heard it. The front door opening. Mom's voice calling out cheerfully that she'd forgotten her wine. We froze. There was no way to get to our car without her seeing us. We were trapped in our childhood home with the woman who'd tormented us for years. I pushed my siblings into the pantry and closed the door. We held our breath as Mom's heels clicked across the kitchen floor. She hummed while opening the wine fridge, the same tune she used to hum while deciding our punishments. My heart hammered so loudly I was sure she'd hear it. The wine bottle clinked as she removed it. Her footsteps paused near the pantry. We pressed against the walls, trying to become invisible. After an eternity, she walked away. The front door closed. We waited another 5 minutes before emerging, our legs shaking. We ran to the car and drove away fast. No one spoke for the first hour. We were all processing what had just happened, how close we'd come to being caught, what Mom might have done if she'd found us. Ava finally broke the silence, thanking us for coming back. Her voice cracked as she described the past 2 weeks. Mom had been retraining her, making her recite the family rules every morning, punishing her for showing weakness by wanting to leave. The studying was just a cover. The real goal was to break Ava's spirit completely, to turn her into the perfect golden child who would never abandon Mom again. We drove through the night, taking turns at the wheel. By morning, we were 5 states away. I'd chosen a mid-sized city with a low cost of living and decent job market. We found a cheap motel and collapsed into beds, exhausted but free. The next few weeks were about survival. I got a job at a restaurant lying about my experience. Lynn found work at a daycare that didn't check references too carefully. Piper got hired at a bookstore. Ava took online freelance work, using her academic skills to tutor students. Together, we scraped together enough for a small apartment. It wasn't easy. We all struggled with nightmares. Piper had panic attacks in crowded spaces. Lynn flinched whenever someone raised their voice. Ava obsessively checked locks. I jumped every time my phone rang. But slowly, we began to heal. We found a therapist who specialized in family trauma and offered sliding scale payments. In group sessions, we learned to communicate without competition, to support each other without keeping score, to love without conditions. It was like learning a new language. Mom didn't give up easily. She hired a private investigator to find us. We knew because he showed up at Piper's bookstore asking questions. But we'd prepared for this. We'd all agreed on a story. We were cousins, not siblings. Our parents had died in an accident. We'd moved here for a fresh start. The investigator left empty-handed. The calls and messages continued for months. Mom cycled through every manipulation tactic. Rage, guilt, false sweetness, threats, promises. We changed our numbers. She found the new ones. We changed them again. It became a routine, like taking out the trash. 6 months into our new life, something shifted. The messages became less frequent. The attempts to find us grew half-hearted. Maybe Mom had realized we weren't coming back, or maybe she'd found new targets for her twisted system. We didn't know and tried not to care. We celebrated our first holidays together as a real family. No achievement boards or competitions, just 4 damaged siblings learning to love each other properly. We cooked together, decorating cookies badly and laughing about it. We gave small gifts that had nothing to do with grades or performance. Lynn started community college, studying to become a social worker. She wanted to help kids trapped in abusive homes. Piper found a better psychiatrist and got properly diagnosed and medicated. His anxiety became manageable. Ava decided against law school, realizing she'd only wanted it to win Mom's approval. She started writing instead, pouring our story into fiction that helped her process the trauma. I went back to school part-time, juggling work and classes. It was hard, but I wasn't doing it for anyone else's approval. My grades mattered only to me now. Nothing says stealth mission like 3 siblings hiding in a pantry while Mom hums her evil punishment tune like she's in some twisted musical. I bet they were all trying not to sneeze or breathe too loud while squished between the canned beans and pasta boxes. And then the private investigator shows up asking questions and they're all cousins now, which is such a classic move when you're trying to dodge your family drama. Plus, I love how they kept changing phone numbers like it's some kind of weird game of telephone tag with Mom, who just won't take the hint that maybe they don't want to chat about achievement boards anymore. My siblings cheered when I passed my first semester, not because I'd struck them, but because they were genuinely proud. We still had bad days, moments when the old patterns tried to resurface, when Piper timed how long Lynn showered, when Ava hoarded snacks, when Lynn apologized for breathing too loudly, when I caught myself comparing our achievements. But we recognized these moments now, called them out gently, worked through them together. The apartment was small and cramped. We shared 2 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. Money was always tight, but for the first time in our lives, we felt safe. We ate dinner together at a real table. We helped each other with homework without sabotage. We celebrated each other's successes without resentment. Sometimes I wondered about other families, the ones where parents loved unconditionally, where siblings were allies, not competitors, where home meant safety, not survival. We'd never have that childhood, but maybe we could build something better. A family we chose, bonds we forged ourselves. Late at night when my siblings were asleep, I'd think about Mom, alone in that big house with her achievement boards and golden child throne. Did she realize what she'd lost? Did she ever feel regret? Or was she already grooming new victims, perfecting her system on other children? I pushed those thoughts away. Mom was our past. We had worked too hard to let her shadow follow us into our future. We'd escaped not just physically, but mentally. We'd broken the cycle. Our children, if we ever had them, would never know the golden child system. They'd know love without conditions, support without competition. The road ahead was still uncertain. We had no extended family to fall back on. on. No safety net except each other. But we'd survived the worst thing imaginable. A mother who turned love into a weapon. Everything else felt manageable in comparison. As our first year of freedom drew to a close, we gathered in our tiny living room for a family meeting. Not the kind where mom lined us up for judgment, but a real discussion about our future. Where did we want to be in 5 years? What dreams had we buried that we could now pursue? The conversation lasted hours. We cried, laughed, and planned. For the first time, we weren't thinking about survival. We were thinking about living, about the people we could become without mom's voice in our heads telling us we weren't enough. That night, I looked around at my siblings. Lynn, finally gaining healthy weight and smiling freely. Piper, medication stable and cracking jokes. Ava, writing stories instead of plotting sabotage. We'd lost so much, but we'd found each other, and that was everything. The year anniversary of our escape was approaching when mom made her boldest move yet. I came home from my restaurant shift to find Piper sitting on our apartment steps, his face ashen. He handed me an envelope without speaking. Inside was a court summons. Mom was petitioning for conservatorship over Lynn, claiming she was mentally incompetent and needed to return home for proper care. My hands trembled as I read the legal jargon. Mom had hired an expensive lawyer. She'd gathered statements from neighbors who'd seen Lynn's condition when I'd taken her. She'd even gotten her doctor friend to write that Lynn needed immediate psychiatric intervention. The hearing was in 2 weeks. We couldn't afford a lawyer. I spent the next 3 days calling every legal aid organization in our city. Most had waitlists months long. One finally agreed to review our case, but they made no promises. The paralegal who took our information sounded overwhelmed and exhausted. Lynn barely ate for days after learning about the petition. She started checking the locks obsessively again, convinced mom would show up any moment to drag her back. Ava researched conservatorship laws online until her eyes burned. Piper cleaned the apartment compulsively, as if a spotless home would somehow protect us. I took extra shifts at work, hoping to save enough for at least a consultation with a real lawyer. My manager noticed my exhaustion and pulled me aside. When I broke down and explained our situation, she gave me the number of her cousin who'd just passed the bar exam. He agreed to meet with us for a reduced fee. The young lawyer, Nathaniel, reviewed our documentation with a frown. Mom's petition was thorough. She'd painted herself as a concerned mother trying to save her daughter from a negligent sibling. She'd conveniently left out the basement imprisonment and abuse. Without proof, it would be our word against hers. We spent the next week gathering evidence. The hospital records from Lynn's admission helped, showing malnutrition and infected wounds. We got statements from my professors about my stability. Lynn's employer at the daycare wrote about her reliability and gentle nature with the children. It felt like building a sandcastle against a tsunami. 3 days before the hearing, Ava made a discovery. While organizing our documents, she found something we'd overlooked. Photos on Lynn's old phone that she'd managed to take of the basement room. The lock on the outside of the door. The buckets in the corner. Her own injured arms. They were dark and blurry, but they were evidence. Nathaniel's eyes lit up when we showed him. This changed everything. He spent the next 2 days preparing our defense, coaching Lynn on what to expect during questioning. She practiced her answers until her voice stopped shaking. We all took the day off work for the hearing. The courthouse felt impossibly large as we walked in. Mom was already there with her lawyer, wearing a conservative suit and her concerned mother mask. She tried to approach Lynn in the hallway, but Nathaniel stepped between them. Mom's mask slipped for just a moment, revealing the fury underneath. Inside the courtroom, Mom's lawyer painted a picture of a loving mother desperate to help her struggling daughter. He presented the neighbor statements, the doctor's letter, photos of Lynn's clean, furnished bedroom at home. He implied I'd brainwashed my siblings, that I was keeping them from their family out of spite. When it was our turn, Nathaniel methodically dismantled their narrative. He presented the hospital records, highlighting that Lynn's condition was consistent with prolonged abuse, not mental illness. He showed the photos from Lynn's phone. He had each of us describe the golden child system in detail. Lynn testified last. Her voice was quiet but steady as she described the basement imprisonment, the achievement board, the punishments for failing to compete. The judge, an older woman with kind eyes, listened intently. Mom's lawyer tried to suggest Lynn was confused, possibly delusional. Lynn simply showed the scars on her arms. The judge called a recess. We sat in the hallway, hands clasped together, waiting. Mom paced near the windows, her lawyer whispering urgently to her. When we were called back, the judge's expression was stern. She denied Mom's petition completely. She stated that the evidence clearly showed Lynn was thriving in her current environment and that returning home would be detrimental to her well-being. She warned Mom that any further harassment could result in criminal charges. Mom's face went white, then red. Her lawyer had to physically guide her from the courtroom as she sputtered protests. We stumbled out of the courthouse in a daze. It was over. Mom's biggest weapon, the legal system she'd tried to use against us, had failed. Nathaniel shook our hands, refusing our attempts to pay his full fee. He said seeing Mom's face when she lost was payment enough, but Mom wasn't finished. If she couldn't use the law, she'd use other methods. 2 weeks later, our landlord informed us that someone had called claiming we were dealing substances from the apartment. He didn't believe it, but he had to investigate. We let him search every inch of our home, grateful we'd earned his trust over the past year. Then came the calls to our employers. Mom posed as a concerned citizen, reporting that we were dangerous, unstable, had criminal records. My manager recognized her voice from my descriptions and hung up on her. But Piper's bookstore was part of a chain with corporate policies. They suspended him pending an investigation. The stress was affecting all of us. Ava started having nightmares again. Lynn developed a nervous habit of pulling out her eyebrow hairs. I caught myself checking the locks as obsessively as they did. We were free from Mom physically, but she still haunted us. One evening, as we sat around our small table eating another budget dinner, Ava suggested something radical. What if we confronted Mom directly, not alone, but together? All four of us showing her that her system had failed, that we were united now in a way her competition could never achieve. The idea terrified me, but I saw something in my siblings' faces. They were tired of running, tired of looking over their shoulders. Maybe facing her would break her hold on us once and for all. We spent days debating, planning, preparing what we'd say. We chose a public place, a coffee shop in our old town. We drove there on a Sunday morning. All four of us squeezed into my hit-up car. The familiar streets looked smaller than I remembered. The house we'd grown up in looked ordinary from the outside, hiding its dark secrets. Mom arrived exactly on time, alone as we'd requested. She looked older, diminished somehow. Her perfect hair had gray roots. Her designer clothes hung loose on her frame. She sat across from us, her face cycling through emotions as she tried to find the right mask to wear. I explained our terms. No more contact, no more harassment, no more attempts to tear us apart. If she continued, we'd pursue a restraining order and criminal charges for the years of abuse. We had evidence now, witnesses, a paper trail of her harassment. The golden child system was over. Mom's masks fell away completely then. She looked at us with naked desperation, realizing she'd lost control forever. She tried several tactics in rapid succession. Tears, promising she'd changed. Anger, threatening to disinherit us. Bargaining, offering money if just one of us would come home. Finally, cold fury, hissing that we'd regret this when we realized how cruel the world was without her protection. We stood up together. Lynn looked her in the eye for the first time in years. Piper's hands were steady. Ava's chin was raised. I felt their strength flowing through me. We walked out without looking back, leaving Mom alone with her cold coffee and shattered system. The drive home was quiet but peaceful. Something had shifted. The specter of Mom that had haunted us for so long felt smaller, less powerful. She was just a lonely woman clinging to control she'd never really had. We'd given her power over us for so long, but no more. Piper got his his job back after the investigation found nothing. He even got a small raise as an apology for the inconvenience. Lynn started talking about maybe pursuing her social work degree full-time. Ava's writing grew stronger, more confident. She started submitting stories to literary magazines. 3 months passed without word from Mom, then 6 months. The hypervigilance slowly faded. We stopped checking the locks so often. The nightmares became less frequent. We still had bad days, moments when the old patterns tried to resurface, but they were fewer and farther between. On the second anniversary of our escape, we held another family meeting. This time, we weren't planning survival strategies or discussing Mom. We were talking about normal things. Piper wanted to save up to travel. Lynn was applying to universities. Ava had received her first acceptance letter from a literary journal. I was considering changing careers, maybe going back to school for something I actually enjoyed. Mom's lawyer trying to make Lynn sound confused while she's literally showing scars is like trying to convince someone the sky isn't blue while they're looking right at it. As we talked and laughed and made plans, I realized something profound. Mom had tried to break us by making us compete. She'd wanted to create perfect, isolated achievers who would always need her approval. Instead, she'd forged us into something stronger. We'd learned to support each other through the worst imaginable circumstances. We'd chosen love over competition, unity over division. The apartment was still small and cramped. Money was still tight. We still carried scars, physical and emotional, from our childhood. But we'd built something Mom could never understand or destroy. A real family, bound not by blood or obligation or achievement, but by choice and genuine love. That night, as my siblings settled in for bed, I stood by our small window looking out at the city lights. Somewhere out there, Mom was alone with her achievement boards and golden child throne. Maybe she'd find new victims. Maybe she'd finally face the emptiness of her system. I didn't know, and found I didn't care. We'd survived. More than that, we'd thrived. We'd taken the worst thing about our childhood, the competition that was meant to tear us apart, and transformed it into the foundation of our strongest bond. We were no longer competing siblings, but a united force, facing the world together. The golden child system was dead. In its place, we'd built something infinitely more valuable. A family where everyone was golden, where love wasn't earned through grades or achievements, but given freely, where support replaced sabotage and cooperation conquered competition. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. We still had healing to do, dreams to chase, lives to build, but we'd face it all together. 4 siblings who'd learned that the greatest achievement wasn't being the best, but lifting each other up. Mom had tried to create winners and losers. Instead, she'd created an unbreakable team. I smiled and turned away from the window. Lynn was already asleep, finally at a healthy weight and peaceful. Piper was reading, his anxiety managed and controlled. Ava was writing in her journal, processing our journey into art. This small apartment held more love than our big childhood home ever had. We were home, not because of where we lived, but because we were together. The golden children had escaped their cage and learned to fly, and that was the greatest victory of all.